today we're making just a quick, easy meal. It is a soccer night, so I'm going to do chicken Alfredo. Usually a meal that everybody likes. Boys don't typically complain about it. So I am going to start with some olive oil in my pan. We'll let that heat up a minute, and then I'm going to add in, I have a bunch of those little sweet peppers that I diced up, as well as one large yellow onion. So we'll let the oil heat up, we'll get that added in and go from there. So these are starting to get soft. I'm going to push them to the side and add in my chicken. I have one very large chicken breast. And one large chicken breast will feed my family, even if I wasn't doing it in this sort of a meal. And I'm going to season it with garlic powder and onion powder. See if I can open it. So the chicken is cooked. I'm going to add in some minced garlic and let that cook for a minute. As you can see, this is a ton of chicken in here. Chicken breast was absolutely enormous. Alright, so this is the sauce that we prefer. I could make sauce myself, but I don't feel like it. And I only have one jar today, so we are going to doctor it up a little bit to make it stretch. I have some half and half that I used for something else that I need to kind of use up, so we're going to put a little bit of that in the jar. And I'm just going to shake it up to get the extra sauce out, and then add that to the pan. So I'm going to let this cook down a little bit, let the sauce warm up, let everything kind of come together, and then I am going to be adding in some extra Parmesan cheese. Alright, so the sauce has warmed through. I'm going to add in some Parmesan cheese. I get this freshly grated from the store where I buy my meats. So we're adding just, I don't know, a good amount because we want to thicken the sauce, but also we want to add extra flavor since we added in half and half. gonna make Italian bread because we're gonna have the leftovers of the Crockpot lasagna. I think they called it a soup, but anyways, we're having the leftover pasta. So I'm gonna make Italian bread to go with it just to kind of change things up. So in my mixing bowl, I'm gonna use my stand mixer. I already have 2 teaspoons of yeast. To that, I'm gonna add 1 1/3 cup of warm water. So you want hot out of the tap, but still be able to put your finger in it without it burning you. So we're gonna give that just a second to kind of let the yeast activate. I do keep my yeast in the freezer. I'm gonna do a tablespoon of brown sugar. A tablespoon of brown sugar. We need 2 teaspoons of salt, and I'll have the recipe linked below. Okay, 2 teaspoons of salt. Two teaspoons of olive oil. I'm just gonna guess on that. And then this calls for 2 tablespoons of Italian seasoning. And I feel like that, at least for my preferences, is excessive. So we're gonna do 1 tablespoon. And I have made this before for both my family and a friend's family. They came over for dinner, and they agreed that the 1 tablespoon definitely felt like enough of the Italian seasoning. Alright. So that's it for that stuff. And then I'm going to add 3.5 to 4 cups of flour. I'm going to start with 3.5 cups. And as this is mixing on my stand mixer, if it looks too sticky, I'll slowly add in the other 1/2 cup. It just depends on your weather, how humid it is, how hot or cold it is that day. So I always recommend starting with the lower amount of flour and then slowly adding in the remaining flour, or sometimes even more, depending on how your dough is looking. So obviously you want this to be smooth, you want the dough to come together, you don't want it sticking to every last bit of the bowl. So let's get 3.5 cups in here, and I'll show you what it looks like after I mix it up, and I'll let you know if I add any additional flour. And I am using a 1/2 cup measuring cup, so I'm going to do 7 of these scoops. Alright, so that's 3.5 cups. I'm going to get this mixed up in my stand mixer, let it knead for about 5 minutes or so, and I will show you what it looks like. Alright, so I have my stand mixer here. I have my dough hook attachment on. You always want to make sure that the top is locked down in place if you're using one of these. And I'm going to put it on the lowest speed setting, which on mine says stir. And we're going to just let this come together and see what we need to do from there. Alright, so that looks like about the texture that I am looking for. It is a soft dough, it is stretchy, it is coming together, it is bouncy, it is not super sticky, it's not sticking crazy to my fingers. So I'm going to get some olive oil in here, coat the dough in it so that it doesn't stick, and I'm just going to let it rise right here in my mixer bowl. And like I said, the recipe calls for letting it rest about 30 minutes, but given the weather today, I might need to let it rise just a little bit longer. And so we'll get that going, and then I will let you know what we're doing next. all came out in one big piece, which is what we're looking for. So I poured just a little bit of olive oil in the bottom, and I'm just going to roll the dough around in the oil so that all of the dough is covered in the olive oil, and that way it won't dry out and it won't stick to the bowl as it rises. So I'm gonna let that sit for about 30 minutes or so, come back and check on it, and we'll see what it looks like. And don't forget to cover your dough when you're letting it rise, especially if it's just gonna be out on the counter or on the stove. I'm gonna leave mine on the stove. If it's especially cold, because we don't keep our house super warm throughout the winter, I will boil some water just in a measuring cup in the microwave, and then I will leave that boiled water in the measuring cup and put the dough in the microwave with it, and that will help it rise as if it was the middle of summer, and it works really, really well. I do that all the time. Alright, so it's been about 40 minutes. This is what we're looking like. So what we need to do next is split this in half and roll it into 2 loaves. So I'm gonna just get a pan, just a flat baking sheet, and put some parchment paper on that. So I have my baking sheet with parchment paper. We're gonna take half of the dough, and you wanna kind of stretch it out into a long rectangle. And then you're going to roll this into a loaf, because remember, this is going to be like Italian bread. So I'm gonna put the towel back on top of this, and I'm gonna let these, you can't even see the full thing. Anyways, so that's what they look like. I'm gonna put the towel back on top of it, let them rise for another 30 minutes before we bake. Alright, so this is how it's looking. It's been about 35 minutes. I did preheat my oven to 350, so I'm going to go ahead and bake this. I believe the recipe said for 30 minutes, but I'll double check that and let you know. So I'll get this in the oven, and then when I pull it out, I'll let you know how long I cooked it for and what they look like. Alright, so these cooked for 30 minutes. I'm gonna let this cool completely, and then I'm probably gonna do 1 loaf and save the other for later, but I'm gonna slice them this way to have just smaller round pieces. I'm going to add softened butter, garlic, and some parmesan together, put that on it, and then bake it back in the oven, maybe with a little bit of mozzarella, we'll see. And then that's gonna go with our leftover lasagna crockpot meal for dinner tonight. I'll show you what it looks like when I get ready to do that. Alright, so let this cool down. We're gonna go ahead and cut it. So I got the whole loaf cut up. I have it all laid out here on my baking sheet again. I put a fresh piece of parchment paper. And then, whoops. So we're gonna do one of those. Alright, and what I've got here is just butter mixed with some Parmesan cheese and some garlic, and I'm gonna spread that through all of the bread. So I've got those all loaded up with the butter, the garlic, and the Parmesan mixture. We're gonna add just a little bit of parsley to the top and a little bit of mozzarella cheese. I'm only going to put cheese on about half in case the kids decide they don't like the ones with the cheese on it. Alright, so I think that'll do. I'll get this in the oven just until everything kind of melts, crisps up, and the cheese looks nice and gooey. And then we'll pull it out and take it. Alright, so this is what they're looking like out of the oven. You can tell on some of them the edges have crisped up a little bit. The cheese is nice and melted. All of the butter and the flavors are melted in. So I'm going to let these cool off just a little bit and I'll show you what our plates look like in the end. Alright, so today I'm doing teriyaki chicken in the crock pot. So we need to make the teriyaki sauce. I already have 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts, 4 boneless, skinless chicken thighs in my crock pot. This is a 1/2 cup measuring cup. I'm going to 1 cup of brown sugar. To 1 cup of soy sauce. I'm gonna get 1.5 cups of water. I'm going to do a splash of rice wine vinegar. A big spoonful of garlic. Maybe a little more. And I'm going to do a good squeeze of ginger. A little bit more out of this one too. And that's it. So of course it's super easy to just buy a jar of teriyaki sauce at the store, but it's just as easy to mix it up yourself at home. It's ingredients that people tend to have on hand. You don't need the rice wine vinegar. I just think it tastes better with a little splash of that in there. So now that this is mixed up, we're just going to pour it over our chicken. Alright, so I'm going to let that just cook on low for about 4 to 5 hours. Yeah, like probably about 4 hours. I'll let it cook on low, but then it'll be cooked and falling apart, ready to shred. Once I shred it, I will add in a cornstarch slurry to thicken up the sauce. So for now, I'm just going to put this on low and we'll check back on it shortly and see what it looks like when it is ready to shred. So I've shredded everything up. Everything is cooked through. The chicken is very tender. I'm gonna add in a cornstarch slurry and let that continue cooking until it's thickened.